So now that we are familiar with the basics of the yield curve, let us do a set of like short thought exercises related to the concepts that we have studied. So the first one involves thinking a bit more about investment horizon and bond payoffs. And to motivate this, let's go back to the numbers that we saw in our example yield curve. So this is the curve that we had in December 2021. And we observed that from this table that the 1 year bond was offering annualized interest rate corresponding to 0.39 percentage, whereas the 3 year bond was offering annualized rate equal to 0.97%, right? So a higher rate compared to the 1 year case, right? Now let's try and think about the following question. Suppose that you have an option of buying a 3 year zero coupon bond, which gives an annualized rate of 0.97% versus buying a 1 year zero coupon bond, which gives an annualized rate of 0.39%. So you have to choose only one of the two options. But you also know in advance that you need money 1 year later, right? So looking at the two options, it seems clearly that, if you could have got the 3 year option, that would have been a better deal, right? Because you are getting the annualized rate of 0.97% versus 0.39%, right? So ideally, you might be thinking you might want to buy the 3 year bond. But then you also kind of are worried that, okay, I need the money not after 3 years, but after 1 year, right? So can I still go ahead and actually buy the more long-term bond, which is the 3 year bond, and get to enjoy this higher return that is there, right? So interestingly, the answer is that yes, you can, right? And the reason why you can do it is because actually you are able to sell the bond after the first year once you don't actually need it, once you need the money, right? So that's the good news. The bad news is that if you follow this investment strategy, it's not that you will be getting a return of 0.97% in the first year. You will, in the perfect world that we have been kind of like discussing, you will actually get a return of only 0.39%, which is the same as the return for the 1 year bond that we actually have, right? So if you use this investment strategy, this is not going to give you free money in some sense, right? Okay, so let's take a look at these numbers to kind of like actually verify that what we just said is actually correct. So let's consider the case where you have got that each of the bond actually has a payoff of 100 units, right? So the 3 year bond is supposed to pay off 100 units at the end of 3 years, and the 1 year bond is supposed to pay off 100 units at the end of the first year, right? So what would be the price of the 3 year bond today? So we can actually use the information. This is the annualized rate, right? This 0.97%, and this is paid off after 3 years. So therefore, we need to discount this 100 by 1.0097 to the power 3, right? Remember, this is the annualized rate that we have. So this is the way in which we can translate the information into what is the price of the bond today, right? So that's approximately equal to 97.15 today. Now, when you try to sell it next year, which will be after 1 year, effectively what you're trying to sell in the market is basically a 2 year bond, okay, with an interest rate of 1.07% in the first year and 1.46% in the second year. So where are we getting these numbers, 1.07% in the first year and 1.46% in the second year? Well, actually, we kind of like did this calculations, right? Remember, we solved for this R12, which is the forward rate. So we found that that was 1.07%. And similarly, we had mentioned that you can solve for R23. And this is basically the equation you would need to solve for R23. And if you solve it, you can actually find that R23 is 1.46%, right? So these are the interest rates, because this is a world in which we are abstracting away from uncertainty. You can actually predict that this will be the 1 year rates, right? So in that case, what will be the price of the 2 year bond next year when you're going to sell it? So from next year's perspective, this is a bond that is going to pay off 100, whereas the rates are going to be this 1.07% and 1.46%. So you can discount it by 1.0107 divided by this expression, and therefore you end up getting 97.52, right? So this actually kind of like allows you to kind of like go back and think a bit more. By the way, this should actually not be 1 plus this should be just 1.0146. This actually allows you to calculate what would be the 1 year holding rate of return. Remember, you had purchased it at 97.15. You are not getting any interim payments because this is a zero coupon bond. So the only thing that you require is in terms of what is the price that you would expect to get when you sell it 1 year later, which is, we just calculated it, it's 97.52. And so therefore you can calculate it and see that the return would actually be 0.39%, which is the same as the 1 year bond. So hopefully this makes it clear that, why we said that even if you kind of like purchase the long-term bond, you are still not going to be getting a greater return than this 1 year zero coupon bond, which was giving you annualized rate of 0.39%. Okay, so that was one application. The other application is in terms of thinking about the differences between the long-term bonds and the short-term bonds, right? So one question is that, should we think of long-term bonds as riskier than the short-term bonds? Now, if this was being issued by corporates, you can think that, okay, probably yes, because you've got that, in the long term, corporates may be at a higher risk of getting bankrupt and therefore being unable to repay back the payments that are associated with these loans or bonds, right? But even in the case where you have got no worries about such default, and default is, by the way, a topic we'll consider in more details in the next week. But for now, let's consider the case of safe government bonds, where by definition, we are thinking of a scenario where actually there's no default risk, right? Interestingly, even though there is no default risk, there might be still other risks, right? And long-term bonds might be kind of like more be affected by this risk compared to the short-term bonds, right? So one such risk is the risk that comes around because of changes in the interest rate, right? So what we want to examine is the following question. So what's the effect of a sudden interest rate change that happens before the bond actually matures, right? And what we will find is that if you have got the equal size or the same type of like interest rate movements, then they're going to have more of an impact on long-term bonds than short-term bonds. So to answer this question, are long-term bonds riskier than short-term bonds? Even if you can ignore the default risk, there would still be other types of risk which would more affect long-term bonds than short-term bonds. And this is one such example. So let's understand this point in a bit more detail. So imagine that you have a 30-year zero bond, which promises to pay 1,000 units after 30 years. By zero bond, again, we mean that there are no interim coupon payments. And suppose that the annualized interest rate is 1.90%. Okay. So in this case, what would be the cost today of this bond? So you can actually do the same calculation as we have been doing. So you have 1,000 and you divide it by 1.01902 to the power 30. Okay. And basically you can show that this is approximately equal to 568.56. Okay. Now, suppose that compared to this 1.90%, the interest rate actually goes up by 10 basis points, right? So recall the definition of basis points. So that means that we are saying that suppose the interest rate goes up to 2%, right? Now, in this case, we know that an increase in the interest rate should lead to the price of the bond going down. And we can actually see this directly also by calculating. So we have got again 1,000, but instead of 1.019 to the power 30, we have now got 1.020 to the power 30. And if we do this calculation, this is 552.08. Okay. So an increase by 10%, 10 basis points actually leads to a reduction by around kind of like 16, but we'll later on calculate the percentage change as well. What about instead, if the interest rate had decreased, then that would have led to an increase in the bond value, right? So for instance, if the interest rate decreased by 10 basis points to 1.8% instead of 1.9%, then the bond value would actually increase to 1,000 divided by 1.018 to the power 30, which is approximately 585.55, right? So if you compare this with the initial one that you had, 568.56, you can see that this is higher, right? Okay, so these make intuitive sense, but we can also now put numbers, right? So basically what we found in our example is that if you have a 10 basis point change in the prevailing 30-year annualized rate, that would actually lead to an immediate percentage change in the value of the bond of around minus 2.9% if you have got a upward movement of 10 basis points. And it would lead to a change in value of plus 3%. So the value will go up by 3% if you have got a downwards movement of the BPS by 10 basis points, right? So if you want to translate this into actual numbers, what it means is that if you have got, let's say, 10 lakh rupees invested in a 30-year bonds, right? This means that even like a small interest rate movement of 10 basis points can actually lead to a risk of about 30,000 in instant risk for every such changes that is happening in the economy, right? And you can see that this actually also highlights the point that the kind of like this is like not insignificant, right? Okay, what about if we had a 1-year bond? So let's do the similar calculations. Suppose that again the bond had an interest rate of 1.90%, and now consider the same this 10 basis point changes as we were doing. So we just want to kind of like keep the interest rate changes as the same as our previous case of 30-year bond, but we only want to change the maturity of the bond from actually 30 years to 1 year, right? Now, if you do the same calculation, right? With the same kind of like, payment of 1,000 units and so on, these are the numbers that you would find, right? So you would find that and you should do these calculations, by the way, that at 1.90%, you had the value of the 1-year bond was 981.35. At 1.80%, the number was 982.32. And at 2%, the numbers are 980.39, right? So the effects, whether it leads to an increase or decrease, are obviously we could have predicted even without doing the calculations. But the point of doing the calculations is we come up with these numbers, and that allows us to also see what's the the percentage change, right? So if you have got a 10 BPS movement upwards, this would lead to a reduction of the value of the bond by minus 0.1%. And if you have a 10 down BPS movement of 10 basis points, this will lead to an increase in the value of bonds by 0.1%, right? So if you compare with before, there the changes were of the magnitude of 3%, right? Either upwards or downwards. Here it's 0.1% upwards and downwards, right? So that means that, again, every 10 lakh that you had invested in 1-year bonds, that's exposed to actually around 1,000 in instant kind of risk for every 10 basis points. So you can see that the effect of interest rate movements are much lower compared to the ones that you had before, right? In fact, you can compare the numbers. This is 1,000 compared to 30,000, right? So 30 times actually less. Okay, so if we were to kind of summarize, basically what we have is that an equal size change in the prevailing interest rates affects the long-term bonds most strongly, right? And if the bond is due very soon, then changes in interest rates do not actually have much influence, right? So it's not that you have to worry about the short-term bonds, because you can basically just get your money back, and then you can decide that what you want to do at the new rate, right? Do you want to use up the money, or do you want to reinvest the money in bonds? However, if you have a long-term bond, then that can actually lead to a lot of like loss or gain of value as a result of this interest rate movements, right? So when we said, remember that we were talking about safe government bonds, in the sense, what we meant safe in the sense that it does not actually have that much default risk, right? But it is susceptible to other types of risk, right? So if we kind of like put all the points in our discussion together, what we are basically saying that if you have this type of bonds, then basically the only in the most short-term bond can you be considered risk-free from this interest rate risk, for instance, right? Okay, the other lesson that we take away is that the appropriate cost of capital should actually depend on the duration of the project, right? So if the term structure or the yield curve is kind of like upward sloping, and we'll see reasons why that might be the case, basically the short-term projects actually have lower costs of capital, right? So because they are not subject to, for instance, the risks that the interest rate changes risks and so on, right? And longer term projects, right, even if they do not suffer from this default risk, they often face a higher cost of capital, and thus they should have to deliver higher returns, right? So this difference between the long-term rates and short-term rates also has a technical name. It's called often the term premium or the time premium, and you might often hear these terms in various points, so you might want to note down, right? So this is one interesting kind of like set of insights that you get when you kind of look at yield curves, and we'll look at some other insights as well.